Now, our first panel, a look at the state of the industry in 2016, hosted by the Motion Picture Association. Please welcome our moderator, William Feng, head of Greater China and Vice President, Asia Pacific Motion Picture Association.
I guess we should
Do I introduce the panelists or? Okay, let's just welcome the panelists. I think. Let's just move to the center a little bit. Oh, this is okay. Good morning, and thank you very much to get up early and get here early for this panel discussion and of the US-China Film and Television Industry Expo's opening forum. And we have a very distinguished panelist for this morning's first opening session, and it's my great honor to have all of you and joining the audience to talk about China's film entertainment industry for year 2016 and looking ahead and the trends, technology, and business models that involve. And before I get to the questions to my panelists, let me just give a little highlights or very top line and overview of the business development in the film entertainment industry in China. As a lot of you may well aware of the roller coaster ride of the box office in China, and after about 10 years of year-on-year growth of average 30 to 35%. And China's box office started with a big jump again in the first quarter, almost hit 50%. And then started to go south, and then continue to plummet until we see it today. And with the prediction of the box office growth in between, anywhere between 5% to 10%, but still is big unknown. So that's a big change. But if you look at the theater development, the growth, and the momentum is still there. Last year, China's theaters, the screens, overall screens, was around 32,000. And as we see it now, as we see it today, China's overall total screen is about 38,000, and with the prediction to reach 40,000, pretty much the same size of the US exhibition market. So what went wrong was the continued growth of the theater development, but the slowdown of the box office. There are many reasons. And one of the big reasons, and like most people will talk about, and then I will ask my panelists, is the role that internet companies played in China. So we well know that internet companies, giants, those are including BATs, Baidu, Tencent, Alibaba. Those are the big global level internet giants, and with the market cap anywhere between 100 billion US dollars to 250 billion US dollars, and like Tencent and Alibaba. Baidu is a little smaller. So they are all in the business. In content production, they either have to set up the film studios or companies, or they acquire the major stakes of those production houses, including Huayi, Bona, and Enlight, and others. And then also they are in the distribution business. All three companies have their own biggest leading online video platforms in China. And China's internet population is somewhere around 700 million in population, with a penetration of 51% of the population, still continues to grow. But the online video population is over 500 million. So those companies set up very big internet online video portals in the distribution business. They also create contents like we make here, like Netflix, make House of Cards, that kind of production. So they attract a lot of internet flow and traffic to their portals. And then those companies, BATs, are also in the business of promotion and marketing of films. They have signed agreements with major film companies. Some they own, or some they have the slate of investment, and also with Hollywood studios to market and promote blockbuster movies in China. And very importantly, and one of the big reasons we talk about last year's growth of the box office of 58% was because of big subsidies by the online ticketing companies. And they are also owned by these three big companies. And anywhere between 5 billion to 4 billion to 5 billion, 4 billion to 5 billion and RMB, which is about 10% of the overall box office in China. So, and then last year and early this year, the government started to look at the irregularity of this subsidies given by the online ticketing companies, because they pay the subsidies. In China, government set the lowest box office, lowest ticket price for movies. And the online ticketing companies, they're competing for market share. The subsidies comes into this space is huge. So with that big portion of the, what we call the fake box office being wiped out, and they see a big drop. And then some other reasons. And having talked about these big internet companies, and then another company that the almighty Wanda is a very different, unique type of company and it looks more like quote unquote traditional studio companies, studios in Hollywood, if we could call Wanda. We talk about Huayi, Bona, and Enlight, those film studio or production houses. Basically, production houses. They don't own a lot of other business, including the sound stages or the production base, like Wanda is doing it now. So Wanda's strategy is very different, and is probably the only company can still operate without major influence or any of the investment coming from the BATs in the film business in China. So I would leave it to Jack to talk more about Wanda. So with that overall development in China, and we look at this year, and because some of the reasons I mentioned, we saw the slowdown of the box office. And so my question, first round of question to three of you, is to talk about the reasons. Why do you see there is a major box office slowdown in China? And that is the first question I have for three of you. And you can talk in detail about from the perspective of your business or where you look at the market. So we'll start with Jack.
Thanks, William. Good morning. It's great to be here, and thanks for inviting me for doing this. Just first of all, thanks the Hollywood Reporters have the cover page about Wanda, so I don't need to repeat a lot of stuff. It's very detailed, systematically described over there, and appreciate your interest in Wanda and the chairman. In terms of the China market, from Phil's perspective, And from when we see what's happening today, first of all, it's not surprised. I think it should be under the correction. And the China market from 6 billion to 44 billion in such short time, and about 20% worldwide box office. There's no way you exploded by 50% every year growth. And last year particularly driven by 3 factors you already mentioned. The subsidy from the online ticketing, the fraud reporting of the box office, and gold rush investment to make all whatever the even not a quality content screwed into the market, etc. So I think we view that as a very positive move, and I believe that it will be very good for the future and set the right pace to the next decade. We've seen that will be driven and steadily sustainable growth for next decade, as the chairman stated about a week ago here. We look about 15% growth for next decade, driven by many factors. And if we look like the overall box office is overtaking US in very near future. And by the end of the next decade, China box office is about 2.5 or 3 times of US box office. Primarily driven by the continuous increase in number of screens. Even by end of this year, the number of screens are about a US size, and grow about 8,000 screens a year. Next year, probably 6. But for Wanda, like 1,500 to 2,000 new screens established in China every year. So we'll gain about 2 to 3 point market share every year, still move on down the road. So we're very optimistic about the market. Probably the total movie screen in China reach 120,000 or 140, in that range probably reach the spot, but still driven by that piece. At the same time, the average the moviegoers per capita was less than 1/4 of the US. So given by that fact, we're still very optimistic about China, and one now still keep on going in terms of increasing market share, provides the best user experience of theaters, the high end of theaters at large. So we're fairly optimistic down the road, and we're determined to really play a big role in this business. By the way, I was in China today. Wanda Pictures is one of the leading production companies in China. Last year, we're way largest in terms of box office in total. And Wuzhou Distribution is a major distribution company in China, as well as Wanda Cinema Line. So Wanda they play the significant role in the overall film industry in China. And that shows not only from Wanda own movies, but also imported movie like Warcraft was released June the 8th, and the China box office about $220 million, which is way more than the rest of the world combined. So that is been showing the market still growing, and as the industry people, especially as the Chinese film industry filmmakers, that's our turn to really make good content to feed the market demands. If you look at the market in the film or sport industry today in China, that's one of the few, if not the only one, the market demand is way higher than the supplied. So this is our job to get good content, connect to Hollywood, work with the Hollywood filmmakers to feed the need of that market.
Thank you. And Adam?
Well, growth is growth. So I appreciate the fact that it's not at the same level, but I sort of echo the comments that my colleague makes in the sense that it's still growing. And that's an exciting opportunity for all of us in the business of creating content. I think, having never lived in China, but spending a lot of time studying and watching and seeing movies of ours play overseas, I think the Chinese marketplace and the audience is very much that of the global marketplace and audience. You have to create compelling content that has an urgency that needs to be seen on the screen that weekend, and that's a reflection upon the storytelling and the kind of ideas and the quality of the films that are being released when there's a saturation and there's so much content to consume on a global basis, but specifically as we're talking about so much great stuff that's coming specifically, from the East now, in order for it to fight and to demand that it must be seen that weekend in a theater, it has to stand out head and above beyond everything else. And if you look at a lot of the movies that we were making here and sending overseas, a lot are sequels. And a lot are sequels that aren't necessarily pictures that people there grew up with in the same way that we grew up with. So when you see something like Warcraft and you can't believe the outsized success that it's having overseas compared to what it's having here, the reality is it's a big disruptive entertainment experience that is on a level that for that audience is something that's fresh and new and unique. And I think that's the challenge for all of us is we have to make awesome movies. We can't just simply treat China as a place to say, well, it's mad growth, and no matter what we do, if we put it there, it will find an audience. It has to be just like what we're doing here, which is the consumer is demanding to make sure what they're going to see is something that's theatrical worthy. And so I think the growth is incredibly exciting, and I think the challenge is for all of us in this room to make sure that what we're making and what we're partnering on and what we're challenging them with and us with is to make sure that we're telling stories that are genuinely disruptive and original and not just trying to do what we've done before, because I think the marketplace there is really about the originality and about being able to take advantage and celebrate that kind of new voice that's emerging now.
Okay, thank you. And Elizabeth?
Well, I would really agree with what Adam is saying. Finally, it's about good content. You make bad movies, you have a bad market. You make good movies, you have a good market. And part of it, I think, is often in emerging film situations, not understanding that all film is a dialogue with the audience. It's not something you feed, you're really creating this conversation with your audience. So in some way, they have to care about the conversation. And one of my very commercial faculty filmmakers said, all films are finally personal, whether it's the big action film or whether it's a small independent film. And it's that individual expression that I think gives the kind of originality that Adam's talking about. It's when you have filmmakers that really have something that they passionately want to say, and they're determined to say it, and they say it with a respect for their audience. So, you have to be aware of, for example, I think a lot of the failure of European film was a failure to ask, who's the audience? What kind of dialogue am I going to have? It doesn't mean, trying to commercially figure out, oh, gee, what does the audience want? You'll fail every time at that. But it does mean when you want to tell a story, respecting the audience you're telling it to, why you're telling it, how you're telling it. Part of the thing about making films in the U.S. is, in many ways, there is no such thing as a U.S. market. We're a nation of mongrels. We have more Chinese than anywhere outside of China, more Japanese than anywhere outside of Japan. So we're always making film for an international audience, but we're not sitting there trying to figure out, oh, well, will the Indian diaspora like this? You're trying to say, I have a story I really want to tell, and have competent filmmakers that will tell it. I think everyone that's come into this market and tried to figure it out from a business point of view purely and not understood that it's finally about that communication with the audience, they failed. The Japanese wanted to talk about incremental improvement. No, it doesn't work that way. Getting great filmmakers and letting them work and supporting them, people who they understand the zeitgeist in a way that they want to tell stories that the audience wants to hear. Finding those people and supporting them, I think, is always the single biggest secret to box office.
Thank you. And all three of you get great personal views about the market development in China and also anywhere, like we're here in Hollywood, in US as well. And a common theme that you cover was how to connect or listen to the audience, how to make great movies, tell stories, and that can attract the audience to go to the theaters. And you mentioned, Elizabeth, you mentioned about Japan or European filmmakers, their experience. In that regard, do you think China market is little, quote unquote, different with the others? because we look at China market, and like last year, the explosive growth, a lot of big movies in terms of box office return were made of fan base. So people, mentioned about the internet population, 700 million internet population, and when somebody get famous who will carry a huge fan base, and then you turn into a quote-unquote IP, and then make a movies. And in many cases, in some cases in China for last year, and there was some sweet success. And don't you think that kind of false expectation that caused some of the young people without just proper schooling and training in the basics like making films, telling stories, coming into the business with the big hope to make movies and the hope to get big box office return. And in your view, that the quality of production, and is China unique from others, and China can go on without really caring about the basics of movie making and still get a chance to success?
Well, I don't know that you're going to see. You see this in the United States now with the influencers, the YouTube generation. Sure, there's this whole fan-based. How long that's is sustainable as these influencers, we might call them, come and go pretty fast. But there's a whole market for that. But I think it's probably a different market than, say, a feature film market, or in the case of the United States, a television series market, because right now, the golden age here is television, with great writers and people really connecting. I don't think there's one answer to this. That's one audience. The problem with that audience is if you disappoint them, they are not loyal. You try to figure them out and make something around one of their heroes. If you make a good movie, it'll be fine. If you make a bad one, they'll desert you instantly. It's like opening a restaurant in LA. You've got one weekend, serve a bad meal, you will go under. So I think you go back to trying to find those stories that connect. And when you ask, is the Chinese market different? My experience has been that every market thinks it's different. We all think we're like everybody else to the point that we can figure them out. And we all think we're so different that we're unique. We're wrong on both counts. Yes, I think there are shared stories. There are global stories. There are people that will argue, there's only so many stories in the world and you just retell them in different ways. There's no doubt, I think, that you look at human beings, we're storytelling animals. We have to tell stories. But we're very demanding about the stories that we tell. And after all, when we make a movie, we're asking for an hour, 2 hours, 2.5 hours of someone's time. That is the most precious thing anyone has. It is irreplaceable. So I think it's justifiable that the audience becomes angry and deserts you if you take their time and don't give them anything back. So it's kind of what are you willing to give to an audience when you make a film? Every time I've seen a film made because somebody thinks it's going to be profitable, it doesn't work. When they make a film hoping it will be profitable, of course wanting it to be profitable, but because you look at our great filmmakers, they truly want to tell those stories, and they will do anything. Bob Zemeckis said one day to an audience of our students, he said, what we never tell the studios is that we would do it for free, because we so want to do it. And the same thing was said in China by another director at one of the panels recently. There's a passion about making material, and I think that's what you share with your audience. You're willing to be vulnerable, tell your story, and yes, no, you don't want to do it for free, but you want to do it so badly that you're not starting out thinking, I'm going to get rich off this. We tell our students, if you want to get rich, try another business. This is a low-margin, high-risk business. If you really just want money, go be an investment banker. You'll do better.
Thank you. And speaking of differences, and Adam, what you took as the CEO for LaVision Entertainment here based in the United States as a wholly owned company of LaVision, Echo, the LaVision Pictures, and headquartered in China. What do you see the difference of your past work with major studios and your work with the Chinese company, and the kind of movies you think? And I remember that in one occasion you talk about if we would start a business making movies today, how we would make movies for the next generation of audience. So what kind of difference of your personal experience with the major Hollywood studios and your current work with LaVision Entertainment, and the difference of the movies you're making?
Yeah, I think the most exciting opportunity with the company I'm currently with, but also just in these kinds of co-productions and collaboration in general, is that we're looking at an industry where the next 100 years is an open road. Everything leading up to this point in Hollywood is based upon a historical comp. And the business has been very reliable, and like, we talk about growth, there's been a very reliable business, and there's been growth, whether it was DVD coming into the marketplace, VHS even before that, Blu-ray, pay TV, all the different windows and all the opportunities that have been created, that have been wonderful opportunities for us in the United States. But the fact of the matter is the box office was something that we can consistently go back to, and we would argue as we would make a film at the studio system, we'd say, well, this movie is like, and this filmmaker's historical comps are, and the weekend that it's being released was. And that was enough between the script and the package and the international appeal and all of the historical data that we were able to rely on in order to make a movie decision. And for the most part, again, as Elizabeth says, you can never bank on anything, especially the ones that you're most sure of. But it was enough to be able to run a business with. And now we see shifts happening in the American marketplace and also in the international marketplace that are unprecedented. In 2014, the top 10 movies represented 26% of the domestic box office. In 2016, if we chart where we think Rogue One and Fantastic Beasts, Harry Potter, will end the year, it looks like it'll be 46% of 10 movies for the entire domestic box office. That's 10% growth over the last few years that we've never seen, but it takes 24 to 36 months to make a movie. So the opportunity with a company like LaVision, or the opportunity with all of these, incredibly exciting companies that are here today in this room, is we don't have to make movies based on historical comps any longer. If we're making movie decisions based on what an audience was excited about 2 or 3 years ago or 5 years ago, you're doomed. It's always the movies that are the greatest disruptions that are the ones that the audience embraces and owns and flocks to and has the greatest celebration of. So I think the opportunity with China is to be inspired by the fact that the road is open in front of us, that we can take creative risks, that we can create new IP. Nothing looks like IP when it comes in. I guarantee, and I know, when my friends at Warner's were making the Lego movie, we all thought they were crazy. When Jerry Bruckheimer was making the Pirates film, we were like, Jerry Bruckheimer's making a movie about a ride, okay. When we made Transformers early on, the response was just mass, hysteria in terms of what, a bizarre concept that was. Now, after the fact, it seems like it's what you're supposed to do, and I think that's the thing that's so exciting, is that we are in a world where it's the next 100 years that are available to us, and we don't have to rely on yesterday's data set. Instead, it's really about making movies for tomorrow, and that's the opportunity for us as, attracting filmmakers and working with filmmakers that we can provide, which is forget about what the studios are doing, because they're doing it so well. But let's try to do something that they're not doing. Let's use this marketplace, let's use this great creative collaboration as an opportunity to zag when they're zigging. And I think that's where there's going to be great success and great creative freedom and terrific disruption in the types of storytelling that we see.
Thank you. And Jack, you come from a very unique background of first working as the head of Microsoft China, and then with Autodesk, and then as the right-hand man for News Corp for Rupert Murdoch's business in China. And now you're taking the role as the CEO for Wanda Cultural and Entertainment Group's business, international development business. And what do you see that Wanda's role in terms of, we talk about the Hollywood system, the new breed of filmmakers or film generation in China. What do you see Wanda's role in bridging the Hollywood production or system of practice with China? And also you talk about a lot the connecting the audience through technology, entertainment and technology. So what do you see that kind of connections that will make Wanda a different company?
Well, people said, why you change your profession? Or for Bill Gates now doing the entertainment. My shelf feeling that I did not change profession. The profession industry itself changed. So if you look at the IT, internet, telecom, media, the $4 trillion of business, now the fence between the business is already removed. So all this mingle together. It's harder to really have the definition which is which anymore. Given all that change, in China in a very unique position, they grow so fast in the last few years, almost from non-screen to build all the high-end IMAX Dolby screens like Wanda does across the country. Among the hundreds of malls, all has its high-end the facilities of that. At the same time, when I look at that business from IT perspective, the first time I was a little stunned. Look at the film business, the movie makers versus the moviegoers are never connected. And we don't even call them a consumer, we call them moviegoers. And so all the business model toward to the studio side, even the talents, you create an avatar, you make a talent, famous star, and they come back charge you more because they're not connected to their fans one way or another. So first part really enlightened me for this business, at least from China perspective, the growth at the later stage. The first part that came out with the 2013 was a look, connect to consumers. And that time WeChat and all those mobile internet pump up. So in order to really connect consumer, online ticketing, the first apps. So business from online ticketing from profit perspective is like nothing, but connect consumer means a lot. So today, if you look at Warcraft in China, 90% of the movie ticketing sold online through the online internet, versus here our EMC probably about 15%. So namely, if you look at our Wanda cinema line, we have like 70 million members being connected through the internet. Basically, they all pay online. When I get the consumer connected, that's a much broader space of the Netflix database. What do we do? So that gives you a lot of imagination what you can do from P&A perspective, from talent management perspective, from studio perspective. And even from content part, I very much agree with Elizabeth. It's not really the way you get a few data, you get a good movie. It doesn't work that way. If that worked that way, every product shooted by Netflix should be a hit. It's not the case. But from P&A perspective, it makes huge difference, right? Look at even the Hollywood movies today, Transformer, Warcraft, and all the big temple movies. If China box office is not same as, if not bigger than US, but you look at the P&A dollars spent in China versus US, it's a small fraction of it, right? They spend like this, and they spend there and there. Because the internet, they connect to the consumer part already play enormous role through that platform. And what that meant down the road, I think the online ticketing company is also here, so they probably share with you a lot of those. And from Wanda perspective, Wanda Pictures, we're doing the movies also, we'll learn a lot through that process. And our new GM, Mr. Jiang, will be next session from Wanda Picture. He's also here. Probably can share more about that perspective. So that's one part. There's another part of the content. It's the creative content. So usually you make the creative process like a production line, like a Ford make a production line. But when that kind of production line, you kill creativity. So that's really the balance. You want that process, you want to have hit Oscar every year, but you want the creativity, that type. So that's how you manage the business. That's beautifully done here in Hollywood. In over 100 years, given how the system, the industrialized, the segment from the completion bond to the guild, to the contract, to the way they work together as about 1 million people in Hollywood to do the movie process. And that's the part of the China really needed and need a long time to learn how to really to create the content. If you look at today's US, China box office, because there's a quota system, so the US import movie are capped, and the local content is the one to control the growth of a year. So if we really remove the quota system, we have like every content that comes to China without increasing new screen, I think China is today's US box office. So that's the part basically from the China's filmmaker folks. I think this is our job to figure a way to really create the best of the content, like Louis just said, to fit the need of that market. And when I believe, connect to Hollywood, connect to internet, connect to consumer as a way to go. So we spend a lot of time here, especially my job, spend a lot of time here. That basically, Chairman has a very, one of the reasons he's one of the most successful one in Asia as a businessman. He had a very clear vision in terms of transform the company from a conventional business to what we call cultural business. It's a Chinese term. Basically, film, entertainment, sports, tourism, and also from very domestic Chinese company to internationalized or global company. These two transformation cross point is basically my job. So that's what really drive us to create, to find the partners, to find the assets to acquire, to get the IP or IP operating right, and the benefit for the China market. Of course, that benefit also being created shareholder value or being capitalized in China will be paid back to shareholders. That's roughly what we have a very clear strategy, and Wanda has a very big need for execution. When see something happening, and do not really kick tire, make a lot of statement, just think a movie, thing happening. And you see how we're still doing that. So we're experienced and we're lucky to have the AMC as our partner in the US. And that experience turned out to be incredibly successful and give us like more encouragement to do. Look, the AMC, since Wanda got it, from nonprofit to very profit, from private company to leasing nesting company, and still growing, even the box office as total in the US like that. AMC's stock price last January, at the beginning of this year, $19, and today we're $32. We're doing so well by real added value or change user experience in US for the consumers, the movie. One, we try to connect to them to service much better. We invested the latest technology and reclining seats just to make a very different experience. Because we love this business today, especially for kids. It's so difficult to remove their eyeballs from their screens. And now you can really block unlimited number of people in the dark room, spend 2 hours of their life for your content, about your content, your career story to become their life experience. That's incredible business. So we love this business. We try to figure the environment is really doing well. We're doing it here in the US. We're going to more theaters in the US. And we are in the process for Europe. And most English-speaking country in the Chinese country, which is very relevant to Hollywood studios. And so we are really do our best in terms of the user experience from the exhibition end. At the same time, we connect to Hollywood and try to really work with Hollywood filmmakers and also learn from the system to fit in China to meet the demands of that size of the market. If that grow bigger than US, a lot to do how the good content can be created. That's a word that Wanda places on. Really try to position that part to meet that demand at the same time to create the value for the investors.
Thank you. So you mentioned about Wanda's strategy to develop into a company more than just a film studio or in the film business, but by extending the extra value to other related business like
Yes.
cultural theme parks
Yeah.
and other things, like the Hollywood, some of the Hollywood studios are doing here in the States and in many other parts of the world. And in China, there's been a lot of discussions. Some of the reasons they talk about the box office slowed down was also somehow contributed by the poor quality of the movies made by, as I say, people with very little experience, just with the hope to make money and then enter the business and happen to hit a jackpot sometimes. And having said that, the government has put a lot of emphasis to help lift the quality of the production of movies by concentrating on focusing on the high concept, high value films, franchise especially. You mentioned about Warcraft, and Adam, you mentioned about Transformer, that those are the huge, especially Transformer, big franchise, and all over the world, especially in China, did box office-wise so well. And Elizabeth, my question to you, I will ask the panel, other panelists as well. What do you think that is the key for China to develop this high concept, high value, contents? We, MPAA, have been working closely with the China's film industry. And Adam, you may well aware of the exchange program. And actually, when you were with Paramount, and we have some Chinese filmmakers coming to the States and spend 1 week of extensive training exchange with U.S. filmmakers to get an understanding of this, how to develop this, high concept, high value movies. And from the education, perspective, what do you think? What do you see China is lacking? And I saw some of the comments you make in your interviews about.
Never hold me to what I said before.
Okay. In U.S., you have top, USC Cinematic and Arts School is the top one. There's two others. But in China, if you count a film school academy, Beijing Film Academy is probably the only one by definition a film school in China. And what do you see the lack of, basic education, infrastructure, and training? And Jack also mentioned this. We will talk about the Wanda studio in Qingdao and the lack of, even if you have the great incentives to attract people to make movies there, but still there are many other costs that may, and you have to fly in, and crew from all over the world to make movies there, and still it's a very expensive operation. So to get the local talents being trained, not just for the very top talents in terms of creating the content, the value, the filmmakers, but the people work in the industry, the blue collar, as we speak, I would say workers in the film industry, to help build this industry and talent pool. And what do you think that China can do?
Well, it's a very complicated question you ask, because I think the first thing I would say is get rid of the term creating high concept. Just let's think about creating great films, great television, great content, okay? I have a wonderful older agent who works with us and has for many years, and when students go into him and they say, oh, I have this idea that's really commercial, Larry always says to them, never tell me something's commercial. Tell me it's a great film that you think people will want to see, and then I'll talk to you. But don't start by telling me it's high concept or it's commercial, because you got the tail wagging the dog here.
Yeah.
So I think training filmmakers, and I think of everyone on a set as a filmmaker, whether it's the gaffer or the guy who's bringing in the catering, because what you have on any production is this community of people, and they either work well together or they don't work. Everything falls apart. Ask any filmmaker, if they don't treat their crew right, they don't make their days, suddenly the film costs a lot more. Things fall apart at a very basic level. I think one of the things that is important to understand when you approach training filmmakers is, and I quote Walter Murch, who, as many of you know, edited everything from The Godfather to The Talented Mr. Ripley and on. Walter talks about the act of creating film and television as the collision of intelligences, a place where you put many different people with different skills, with different beliefs, with different, and you have a script, which is in many ways an outline almost, because what comes out the other end is never what you started with, because of the energy among people. And so I think what I would say is the first thing you have to understand when you train people is that this is about individual views meld with other views, brought into this creative stew that finally produces a great film like Avatar, or a great film, like Schindler's List for that matter. It's always a creative stew of people. So the first thing, we've been trying to do in China, because we see it as the two biggest lacks, is to take focus off technology and get people to understand that technology never made a great movie. Fabulous tool, can't make it without them, never will produce a great movie. So quit fetishizing technology. And we've tried to say the two things we see China lacking are writers, i.e. storytellers, and to enhance those people in the way of freeing their imaginations, allowing them to begin to engage with their stories. And second, you don't have producers. And perhaps the strength of the American film industry, although many directors won't admit it, is producers. I often hear from my young directors, I didn't understand a producer until I needed one, and now I really understand it. Someone that's going to guide that, that's going to keep the creative team on track, who cares very much about the realization of the vision. But those are the two things that I see really lacking. So what we've been doing mainly in China are screenwriting workshops. And I find that the young people there are hungry to find out how to free up their ability to tell stories. And the Chinese education system, while it produces great scientists, it does not produce creative people, as I think you know, because of the kind of often rote education that doesn't allow the student to color outside the lines, as we often say. And so I think when we get young filmmakers, the first thing we have to do is give them the freedom to start imagining things and creating ideas and then following them through. But the danger is to think that screenwriting is about, structure or these quickie courses, or that filmmaking is about technology. It's not about either one.
Thank you. Actually, I intend to ask a few more questions. I look at the time. I think that it's better for us to pause and give the opportunity to the audience and to ask a few questions. I will say 3 questions, and if we can get someone here on the floor to help. Do we have any questions from the audience?
This one there.
Okay. One in the middle? Yeah, can you stand up? Yeah. Can we get a microphone for you? So we need a translation.
The mic's right here.
Right. Can you walk up to the microphone? Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, esteemed panel. And you talk a lot of Ms. Daly just spoke about discovering new filmmakers and discovering new talent. And the fact of the matter is there's an ocean and 6,000 miles in 15 hours that separates us. I've been to China 3 times this year. I'm going back. How can there be a substitute and even a dialogue as if we from Hollywood don't go spend significant time in China being on the ground, being in the subway, seeing people interact with content, and being among the people there.
Well, I think you have an excellent point. I mean, one of the issues we have is we know very little about each other. We think we know a lot. I often have the experience of going to China or going to other countries in Southeast Asia and Asia, and there are some countries I've been to 25, 30 times, and every time I go, they seem more foreign. Because every time I go, I see a little deeper into the culture. And I think the danger is that we really need to understand each other at the level you're talking about, because I would venture that very few people have read the literature of the other country, know a great deal about the history. We know the superficial things. So I don't know. I don't have an answer for you. We try to send people and have them, stay for 2 weeks, a week. It's not enough. We know that. But I suppose we all wind up saying it's better than nothing.
At the same time, human stories are human stories. Rites of passages are rites of passages. There's certain touchstones that we all experience and go through. The key is to try to find the way into that story that doesn't seem so alien that you make a decision based on it, based on the fact that it may seem too foreign. But if you can find or distill that one way in, and it may be a robot, it may be an asteroid, it may be a love story, it may be the thing that gives you the excuse to allow yourself to experience that. But once you get into it, it really, at the end, it all comes down to, are we going to kiss the girl? Are we going to get the guy out of where he's trapped? Are we going to, persevere at the end of the day? These stories are, pretty global. And so what we grow up with here, I think, is very similar to what everyone is growing up elsewhere in the world, which is there's that rhythm of movie making that, I think is an international language that we can rely on.
Thank you. And any more questions? Yep.
Hello, my name is Athena, and thank you for your great talks today. I had a question. So it was just discussed that China is going to be easing the quotas for foreign imports, and this has a lot of implications for both industries. There's a lot of discussion about how the US studios currently make a lot of movies with China in mind, but with only so many movies allowed into China, that was kind of limited to a certain extent. But I think that there are some implications both for how the US is going to be, how this is going to affect the US market, as well as the Chinese market with an influx of foreign films. So I was wondering if you could speak to what trends you think will occur from this.
Jack, you want to take this question?
You're actually the expert for that. Actually, if you look the current the system, if you look at China really grow in the last 30 years from where they were until where they are today. They're basically driven by two engines. One is called open, another called reform. Reform is create the value by optimizing existing assets, which are state-owned today, only one-third economy. And open basically to open up to the world. China is one of the few developing country opened up than most other countries. That's the benefit a lot from the rest of the world as well as China. That's make it where China they are. So by every industry, they start from somewhere and it opened up all the way through. And the way open than most other countries you can think of, like a telecom, even Japan today, not like a China in terms of telecom at large. So from that trend, I think the movie industry, the trend will be more and more open. That's the direction. If you look at last WTO, the 2012, that time China felt like a wolf coming versus a WTO negotiation next year, they're much more confident as of today. And the market is way bigger than they were that time. So my personal belief that the trend will be get more and more open. That's just direction we'll go. And for us, for the Hollywood filmmakers, that's an enormous opportunity in China. And I think that's, in the past, one of the key reasons Hollywood is so movie-centered, or U.S. has been the major dominant box office in the world. U.S. box are like this, and number 2 and number 3 like that. Until today, there's another major market come up. So I think that the emerging of a China market in terms of that box office of next decade will give the enormous opportunity for the growth of Hollywood. That's actually the fact in the last 5 years. You look at the worldwide box office growth, the primarily driven, the big chunk is driven, more than 70% of those are driven from China. And so that's really helped a lot in Hollywood here as movie makers. I think down the road, I'm sitting right here to look in Hollywood. I feel like not only the US market and China market grows, an enormous opportunity for Hollywood filmmakers. And from us, from China perspective, especially for One Downloads, we try not only to connect the people to Hollywood, to more, like we open the studios, and the studio have like an 18 category. Each of them had the training program for Hollywood. So all the operator folks in Qingdao today are either from Hollywood or from Australia, as a lot of my former colleagues in Fox are running that operations there. So by one part is to really connect the people together, and hopefully we get more and more kids can have the opportunity to learn from like USC and all the major film schools. But at the same time, we learn a lot from the system itself. I think a lot of the likeness are not really individual like writers. If the movie script of there, who's the agent? Who represent their interest, and their work are never be really protected and paid well by so far. There's a lot of system-related pieces associated with it. That's the part I think China take a long time to learn from Hollywood. Gradually build that from market perspective, and from the IP perspective, from the really the fairness in terms of the share profit perspective. That part I think China can learn a lot. But to answer your question, I think that the trend is getting more and more open, and the more opportunity for Hollywood filmmakers.
Thank you. And I would like actually also address that question to Adam. With your role and as the head of the Vision Entertainment here in US, and your responsibility, as I understand, are more for creating content for international market. And do you also have a role to play with the Vision Pictures, which is based in China, to create contents for the Chinese market, a local production there?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's one and the same. Obviously, the movies that are specifically geared to the Chinese market, I have no business making those movies or telling those stories because I have no experience in that. But making movies on a global basis is something that is really important for us, and we believe very strongly that that movies are now truly an international experience, and you can't arbitrate a co-production. It has to be something, and I think you'll hear about this through all these conferences that are taking place. It has to come naturally. It has to be organic. It has to be a story that demands an integration in the story, and not something where you say, okay, well, here's the part where the US actor plays in a Chinese movie, or the part where a Chinese movie star comes into the American movie. It just doesn't work. The audiences don't accept it as anything other than what we accept it as, which is that it's a cameo at best. These things have to come naturally, and they have to come organically in the storytelling. The thing that I think is the biggest opportunity and the biggest challenge in all of this is, it's true that our industry here in the States is a very mature business. There's so much that we do right. There's so much that we do, that is based on 100 years of a formula of success. And there's also a calcification in the process that is become something that we accept as being the rhythm, simply because of old business practices that are also hurting the business right now. And I think that having the opportunity to really also learn from an emerging market like China. So yes, it's true that storytelling and the filmmakers and the level of experience when you roll out a crew there on a US movie, The studio's responsibility is to hire the director and the screenwriter and the producer, but after that, maybe you care about the production designer and the DP and the costume and a couple key department heads. But with that, you've just hired 60, 70, 80 years worth of experience. And they can go off and staff that movie, and the movie will come out incredibly well, and you can depend on the production value and the production management. In China, I think it's all new. Everybody's coming together for the first time and meeting each other, so you just don't have that level of experience. That's an exposure, but it's also a huge opportunity, because some of the stuff that I continue to find myself acting in the rhythm of, you look back and you say, but why are we doing it this way? Why does this exist? When you were shooting film and you were waiting for film to come back from the laboratory, that created a lot of rhythms of movie making that now we don't wait for film to come back from the laboratory, it's instantaneous, and yet we continue to act like we shoot on film. So I think this whole moment in time right now is to take from the best of these two worlds, the best of what we've created, but also not to be the Ford Motor Company and still relying on Henry Ford's Model T assembly line, and to also be inspired by what this market allows us to do, which is to innovate and to be inspired by and to challenge ourselves and not just rely on how to institutionalize our success, because as Elizabeth says, that's where you get into deep shit.
Yeah, thank you. Actually, you touched a very important subject matter. And for all the years, people talk about films and co-productions aiming to get audience in China or with the hope to reach an international audience. And it's all about project-based. And you talk about the development of projects that both sides work together organically to do this together. That's important. There's no short-term quick solution for this. It's a long process that is great. It's great to see Chinese companies putting people on the ground, setting up US-based companies as their subsidiaries, and also Hollywood studios setting up their operations in China. It's not just like a project-based development. It's more like putting people on the ground. And I always say a joke to people like you eat together, you live together, and you go to work together. And as we say, 同吃同住同劳动. And then you get to build a chemistry, and then you develop projects organically and together. So that's the way to go. And thank you for sharing that. And we got one more question. Okay.
My name is Joe. I'm from Chicago, originally from China. I'm a producer, and I know the Cubs are going to win the World Series today. That's for sure. My question is about production, actually. So I know there are so many co-productions are being produced now. I really care about how both countries' film crews work together. And my question is, how do you guys push and encourage both production teams to work together more smoothly in terms of other pre-production, production, post-production aspects?
So your question is, we've only got time for one panelist to answer your question. Would you like to?
I have Mr. Goodman.
Okay.
I think it just comes with experience. We've shot in China. When I was at Paramount, we made movies in China, and at DreamWorks, we made movies in China. And there was a really terrific crew base that was there, but it could service one big Hollywood shoot at the time. This is many years ago. Now I suspect, because there's more shows running through, that they can handle many productions, and especially the Chinese productions. The facilities and the technology and the emerging technology that's coming out of China right now is as good as anything that's here. And I think the more that US producers and crew members can spend time on the ground there, prior to just your location scout, but really taking trips and meeting people, because it's a really open community. The more people can go and speak and get to know the facilities and have just a shorthand of what's going on, the better. You can't arrive on day one and expect to be shooting on day two. And that's the thing, is when we roll a crew out to London or to Prague or any of these places. We've shot there so many times. There's such a shorthand with the people. In China, spend the time there right now and get to know the facilities that they're creating and building, and they will welcome you and really invite you into seeing what's going on. It's not a closed environment. It's very easy to be able to witness what they're creating there, and I think if you put the investment in, it will pay off in incredible dividends.
Thank you.
Actually, I really echo what Adam said. That's not easy, but it made a lot of progress recently, and you see how the good co-production movie coming out, especially through the legendary The Temple movie, the first time ever, such big co-production called Great Wall, directed by Zhang Yimou, played by Matt Damon, the first tier of the artists from both across the water. And see, in the past, it never really happened that kind of scale. Today, you see like a Temple movie in format of co-production. So you see them progress and make more, and the regulator try to make it easy. So I think down the road, this will be better and better and bigger co-production film coming.
Yeah, thank you. With that, we will conclude this morning's opening forum of the UCFTI Expo. And my personal thanks to our distinguished panelists for stepping by and spending your time and share the valuable experience or insights about China market and the movie making in general. And I think the audience is as appreciative as I am. So give it a round of applause. Thank you again. Thank you.
We'll be back in just a few minutes.